Well, if you have ever considered either fostering or adopting from foster care, you are probably aware that there is a huge need for families who are willing to foster or adopt teens. But I think for most of us, the idea of adopting or fostering a teenager, someone who has had this whole life before they ever met us, can feel really intimidating and oftentimes scary. Whether it's that we're worried about behaviors the child might have, or if we just feel like we are not equipped to handle a child that age when we haven't had the experience before, there are a lot of reasons why you may say no to teenagers. But today I'm so excited to share an interview with you with someone who said yes to teenagers even when her and her husband were very young themselves. Karly Pancake is an adoptive mom to 2 teenagers who were adopted from foster care, as well as her biological son. And I think she has such amazing perspective on adopting teens and how the process works, how you can adjust, and kind of what to expect. And hopefully we can dispel some myths about fostering and adopting teens along the way, because there is a lot of fear-mongering out there, and the truth is, it's just not always like that. So I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did, and I hope you maybe consider being open to fostering or adopting teens. So I just wanted to let everyone know that this is Karly, and funny enough, we actually went to college together, and I ended up finding, I think I found you through like an Instagram reel or something, and we weren't like super close in college. We were both RAs together in the same dorm. And I was like, man, I really like her stuff, but she looks so familiar. And I was like trying to figure out, your last name is different and everything. So I was like, and then I was like, oh my gosh, we went to the same college. So it just totally hit me. And I thought that was kind of a cool connection. So I personally really enjoyed like learning about foster care and adoption stuff through your lens of having older kids in your home. And, our oldest is 12 and we got her when she was 10. So it's like a little bit younger than the situation you're in. And I get so many questions about fostering or adopting teens, and there's a lot of fear around it. Like, I think there's a lot of like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so hard or so difficult. And so I would like to maybe dispel some myths and also just kind of hear your perspective as someone who has walked through it. And so we can give everyone who's listening kind of a good picture of what it could look like in a practical sense. So yeah, with all of that said, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, and you can tell us a little bit about your family, like how many kids you have, ages, etc.
Yeah, so I'm Karly Pancake,
Best
and
last name ever, I just have to say.
it's a pretty fun last name. TJ also went to Cedarville,
Okay.
so yeah, that's where we met. So we started the foster care process when we were 25. We had been married for 2 years, and we had no biological children. So Kendrick came first to us. He was 9 at the time, and then we adopted him 9 months later. And then Kiana came, that was 27. So 2018, he was adopted. Then Kiana came next in 2019, and she was 13. We decided we had like just like seen a lot of statistics about the teens in foster care and aging out, and the struggle with that. And I just like, once I knew about it, it was really hard to say no. So we opened up from 5 to 18 at that point, which looking back, I'm like, wow, we were really gutsy there.
Yeah.
But Kiana came and she was 13. And then we adopted her 9 months later. So both of them were in our home for 9 months. We only had one other placement in between them, and he was just with us for a month, and he was much younger. He was 5.
Okay.
It's kind of fun to have a younger little guy for a little bit. And then I had Eli, my only biological kid, in April of 2021.
Okay.
So he's 1.5. So now all my kids are 17, 14, and 1.
That is quite the gap there. So
I hate the gap.
Yes. Oh,
But it's for fun.
yeah, that's really cool. I think that's such a unique story, because I think so many people go into adoption, they're like, we only want to adopt a kid. Like I talked to some people who are like, we only want to adopt a kid or foster a kid under the age of 5 or only newborns and I just love that you were like, when you heard about the need, you thought, okay, well, maybe this would work. And even though I'm guessing some people in your life might have thought you were a little crazy doing that, because I mean, people thought we were crazy, even with taking on older kids and stuff. And we were like, no, I really think it's going to be a good fit comparatively. So
Yeah.
that's really cool.
We
So
honestly never considered babies. So
yeah,
it just like wasn't really, that wasn't part of our passion, I guess.
yes.
Not that babies, I mean, I love babies, but when we got into it, we were like definitely 5 and up. So
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, I think that's something a lot of people need to kind of think through. Like, you know, I think everyone thinks, oh, if I adopt a baby or foster a baby, they're not gonna have any trauma. Like they're gonna be completely fine. And you're like, well, that's not true, first of all. Second of
yeah,
all, when you have older kids, sometimes you get more sleep because
that
they're
is
not
so
waking
true.
you up all the time, you know?
There are a lot of practical benefits, which we can talk about later, but yeah.
Right, right. Okay, so it sounded like you kind of touched on this, but I was curious what first led you to considering foster care. And I mean, I know you mentioned part of that you heard some of the need, but I'd like to hear kind of the story of what made you say, okay, we want to foster or adopt before we ever have biological kids or think about that.
Yes. So as a 7th grader, my parents decided to have guardianship of a young lady who it was not foster care, but she was in our home for, I think it was 7 months.
Mhm.
And I like immediately like treated her like she was my sister. It was like very important to me that she felt at home, and it just was kind of like a natural um I, I don't know how to explain it, like calling on my life, I think. I like as a 7th grader. So when she left, it was very devastating to me. And I kind of promised myself that I would do some form of foster care in the future once I understood that that was a thing that happened. So fast forward to college, when I met my husband, um, we, I, I kind of said to him, because I did not want, he was a pre-seminary major. I did not want to marry a pastor. So fun thing with
Yeah.
that. But I was like, I don't want to marry a pastor, but I'm interested in you. So we'll give it a shot. But here's the deal. Like if we get married, like we are going to do foster care.
Mhm.
And he was like, what's foster care?
That's
So
so
he
funny.
did not even know that foster care existed. So he did
Wow.
fair share of research. Once he kind of understood what it was, he was like fully on board, which I was not really expecting. But he's even said like several times that he doesn't really know exactly what it means to feel called as a pastor, but he's
Hmm.
like, I definitely feel called to foster care.
Wow.
So he's probably like in the moment when it's like, should we take this kid? It's always him that's like, absolutely yes. And me
Wow,
like,
that's really cool. Yeah. I love
um,
that he went from not knowing what it was to being like completely on board. That's
yeah,
really cool.
yeah, that shows a lot about his heart.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and then with older kids, I guess I just have always have loved older kids. I worked at camps and was a teacher, and I loved working with kids in general, but then like as a young college graduate, I really loved teenagers, and I was like, I think I could be a parent, which might be a little naive now looking back, but
We all have those moments with me.
I do feel like I still feel like that. I kind of love the teenage years. They just are like trying to figure themselves out. They're
Mhm.
hilarious. And it just like broke my heart that like it breaks my heart still that there are kids that want a family that don't have one. I don't know. I don't understand why.
And with
That,
so many kids, it's like because of their age, it's like there are all these adoptive families who want to adopt infants,
yes.
but they're all lined up. I mean, I think I've heard stats before where it's like 20 families per infant born in the US that's placed for adoption. There's 20 families that are waiting to adopt that child. But then
Yeah.
we
And
have these teens who are, they're like so many of them who are looking for homes and yeah,
there are 100, I mean, not all of them are teenagers, but 100,000 kids.
yep, waiting and yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'm curious if I mean it sounds like you had kind of this drive to welcome older kids and teens to your home, but I wonder if you had any hesitations or worries as you were walking into it and kind of like what did that look like for you before you were actually started?
Yes, I definitely had hesitations. I think some like specific ones, which I think are pretty common, like across the board, was just like um about trauma in general and how that would manifest in older kids. Um, like particularly sexual trauma can be really hard to navigate with older kids. So that was kind of scary to me. I kind of questioned if I would be good at it because I had never parented. And so I I didn't know how I would be as a parent. I knew that I really loved working with kids and being a teacher, but that is a different role. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be any good at this. And also like teenagers can be pretty brutal. Like I knew that from teaching. So I was like, what if I get one that hates me? Because when they choose that they hate you,
Yeah.
it's really hard to turn the car around. So I don't know how else to put that, but yeah, there were a lot of fears that I had around it. But also I tell people all this all the time that I think that I just really had a lot of innocence that just like I didn't know what I didn't know. And I kind of think that I needed that to jump in. So
Makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so I would like to know, like, what was the adjustment process for you once you welcomed some older kids into your home? And also, you can share as much as you feel comfortable with, but the adjustment process for your kids as well. Just so, people who might be considering this can get an idea for what does that process look like and what are some things they could do or not do or, to walk
yeah,
down that same path.
yes. So it was kind of different with each kid. So I'm trying to figure out like which route to go. Like Kendrick was a pre-adoptive placement, meaning that they placed him with us knowing that he was going to need a long-term home. It wasn't 100% that we were going to be his home, but it was like pretty sure. And so when we like had some meetings with him, um, like a weekend, we did first just a dinner and then a weekend, and then he came for good after that. And so that was nice to kind of, I mean, I would suggest if it's in that like matched adoption type situation that you have several meetings before they just like come and live it with
Yeah.
you. I think it's really good to like kind of get a feel for each other. I remember like kind of like looking at my husband like, are we doing the right thing? I don't know. Like he was in the backseat and I was like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. It's
So there are
awkward. It's awkward.
yeah, there are a lot of those like awkward moments. And especially like it can be really hard to like you're like racking your brain, like, what can I ask? Because you're like, what's your favorite vacation? Or like they've just had like their whole lives ripped from them. Like you can't ask questions like that because it
Yep.
like brings up all kinds of weird,
Or
hard
things they
memories.
didn't get to have, or, and yeah.
Right. And so it is good. I mean, I would say like if we were to open again, one thing that I would do is write down a list of questions.
Mhm.
Because that is just like really hard to make conversation. A lot of times like would you rather game type stuff works a lot better with older kids in the car or like situations where you're not like head on where they have to look at you in the eye. Because it's overwhelming for them.
Mhm.
Um, I think with my daughter when she came, we tried really hard to give space and like really, but then also really pursue connection. So, because I think it is really overwhelming. I wish we had given some more time for like downtime because we were really busy. My husband was a youth pastor. I was a teacher. And so we were like constantly like, okay, let's go to this basketball practice. Let's go to this. Let's go to this. And that is just like not the move for kids when they're adjusting. So I wish we had like kind of made room in our schedule to just like solely focus on the kid that's joining our family. I think that would be from my perspective, it was exciting and terrifying at the same time. And so just trying to find ways to like especially connect with the kid that's like new and also the kid that or whatever kids are in your home, like making sure that they still feel grounded. I asked Kendrick if he was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to bed. I have to wake up and be with these people again tomorrow. And he said, no, I was pretty excited because I had a wubble bubble, which was like this thing. It was like this weird ball. I was like, I don't even remember getting that for you, but he was so pumped about it. So
kids are simple creatures sometimes, you know?
They are. So I think like finding some kind, like I've seen people do welcome baskets, taking them shopping, but like not too much.
Yeah.
Like overdoing it the first couple days. But just like giving them an opportunity to make them feel at home.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what you said about with your daughter, just that balance of giving space but also pursuing connection is like a hard line to walk with teens. Like I've taught teenagers too, and it's just like, yeah, you're like they kind of want to know you, but they also don't want to be uncool, and that's definitely an interesting line to walk. Okay, so I was kind of curious as well. What do you think has been? I want to talk about a couple things, I guess. I want to talk about what's been the most challenging part of maybe just adopting in general, but adopting older kids specifically, and also the most rewarding parts.
So this is a hard question to answer. I'm sure you relate. Yes. Because there are so many of both of those things. As far as challenging goes, I think I would say probably the most challenging has been figuring out trauma, and how it impacts our everyday minute to minute. It's not just, I think when I was doing the training, it was like, you'll have these moments of trauma and you have to like learn how to deal with them. But it's like ingrained in their brains as they're like healing, you start seeing evidence of it kind of slowly falling away. But at the beginning, there's just a lot. And it doesn't necessarily just, it's not a one moment thing. It's a lifelong journey. And so you have to be prepared to walk it with them. And so that has been challenging to say the least. But I also, like, on the flip side of that, I feel like understanding trauma has been very rewarding as well. Because when you understand the brain and why their actions are happening, why their behaviors are happening, it gives you insight in how to work with them and help them heal and give them nurturing care in ways that help them heal. And that seeing evidence of their healing is probably the coolest thing that I've ever witnessed on this earth. Just the fact that God gave our brains the ability to heal through relationships, I think has been really special to witness that. Not that we are the healers by any means, but that we get to like basically just witness them growing into the person that they are. And they are seriously so cool. Like my kids are so cool. They have so many quirks and special talents, and they love my baby so well. The baby,
Aw,
that's their baby too. They're like obsessed with him. So
that's great.
yeah, it's been, I think, both challenging and rewarding to understand that. And just the other thing I would say rewarding is like seeing them grow into their passions. So
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think too, when people adopt older kids or they think about it, they're like, well, I'm not gonna have much time with them. I'm not gonna have these experiences. But it's like you do. Sometimes you get so many firsts with them, or you have all these moments. And like you said, even just witnessing the moments of healing. I think that is really amazing. And sometimes I wouldn't even notice that my kid was having like a trauma response until it started to go away. And I'm like, oh, they stopped
yeah.
doing that thing that like they used to do all the time that I was just like, what? You know? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So
It's really cool to witness that happening. It's just amazing.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, shoot, you said something that I was going to hit on, but I can't remember. Oh yeah, about getting to experience the first with them.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's silly when people say that about like only having a certain amount of time with them, because like you have a relationship with your parents for forever. It's
For
not
forever. Yeah.
a one time. It's not until they're 18. It's forever.
Right.
Uh, and so yeah, I think that's a kind of a limiting way to view it. I know someone, her name's Annie. She was adopted when she was 26.
Okay.
And so you never age out of needing a family. So
Yes,
I don't know.
exactly. Well, and I was going to ask you what was one of the most surprising things. I know for me, that was one of the most surprising things is how many firsts we experienced with our kids. Like I was thinking, oh, they've probably done, I mean, we experienced the first sledding, the first time swimming, the first time trick or treating. And I'm like, I never would have expected to experience that with a kid who was like 10 or 11, you know? So I think it is really cool to be able to still have those experiences.
Yeah, and not even like those big experiences, because that's what I said too. That's funny, but about being about the surprising, the most
Yeah.
surprising is like how much I get to play with my kids in a way that is little kiddish. Um,
Mhm.
like we were on the trampoline yesterday with all three of them, and I was the monster chasing them, which sounds so silly, but like we were having like such a good time. And I just think most teenagers would not participate, but mine do. And
Mhm.
it's just really sweet. Like sometimes I imagine their little 4-year-old selves as we're playing, and
Mhm.
then they're getting to experience that healing now. As I don't know, it kind of makes me teary.
I think that's so interesting because I've noticed that with my kids too. I'm like, man, you really like to hang out with me more than I think a kid your age would. Like I'm just like when I was your age, I think I was like, oh, I don't want to be with my parents that much. But I think that that's a really cool way to look at it, to think, okay, I'm giving them what they might have not had when they were that age. And so and that is so common with kids who have been through trauma. And you know, like we've all seen it where you're like, oh wow, you want me to treat you like you are 5 and you're 15 or you're 10 or and I think sometimes it can be a little bit like off-putting at first. And then but I love how you're just like you embraced it and you can picture them at that age. That's a really great way to view it, I think. So okay, so I mean hearing your story, it just sounds I know there's challenging, but it sounds so positive compared to what people imagine. You know? Like I think people imagine like, "Oh my gosh, if I had kids afterwards, like I would be worried to have the older kids." And you're saying your older kids are loving on your baby and stuff. Um so I would just be really curious to know like what would you say to those prospective adoptive or foster parents who feel quote unquote afraid of teenagers?
Yeah. Well, first I would say I understand, because teenagers can be kind of brutal at
Mhm.
first. They put up a hard like front. They look hard. They look like they don't want to talk to you. And sometimes they really don't want to talk to you.
Mhm.
But they really are soft on the inside, and little kids on the inside, really. They're, especially when they've experienced trauma, there's just a hurt little girl or boy inside of there that needs someone to come and love them, right where they are. And so, I guess I know that there are teenagers that act out through aggression and stealing and things like that. That's definitely something that exists within foster care. So I don't want to diminish those things, because that would be dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
But there is very much a way forward with all of the trauma that they've experienced. There is a way through that. And you have to, I will say that if you're not willing to be open to learning through that process and understanding them for who they are and loving them right where they are, then you're probably not going to be successful in fostering and adopting teenagers, because you just kind of have to be willing to be wrong. You have to be willing to get it wrong a lot, and give yourself grace and give your kids grace. And but they really are just kids. I think especially the files that they send you, and when it's in a potential placement, they look really scary. They're like, oh, he stabbed a girl with a pencil or something. And you're like, oh my gosh, she could stab my other kids with a pencil. And okay, maybe, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But also I think that is discounting the impact that you can have as a parent, that is very intentional and loving and knowledgeable about what they've been through. So it's just, I was 25. I knew nothing. I knew nothing about parenting. I had my training, and that's all I had. I have done a lot of work to understand my kids. And so, but I didn't start out there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that makes sense. And I think the honest truth is, no matter what age of kid you adopt or foster, you are going to be wrong a lot. You're going to be learning all the time. You're going to make mistakes all the time. And so I think sometimes they put up this hard wall, like, oh, I could not take a kid over the age of 10 or over the age of 5. And, it's just kind of like, well, actually, those kids could have some really difficult times too. And you might be surprised how difficult it could be. So
after having my baby, I was like having a 2-year-old, I was like, I just don't know if I was prepared for how much I have to be on him all the time, because he's always got to put a battery in his mouth or something. Because my older kids, when they came to me, I really could go in my room, and be on a video game or something, and I could have some time. And I just don't have that anymore. There are some pretty distinct benefits about teenagers. They're able to dress themselves. They sleep in. They can help around the house. They are they're fun. You can teach them life skills, which is fun. There's just a lot of things that are practically really awesome about having teenagers. Not that should be the reason.
I totally understand, but a lot of people will view us as being very lucky, because with our first adoption, we were open to kids up to the age of 10, and we got placed with a 1-year-old, which is extremely rare for an adoptive placement. And, it was kind of funny because we were more interested in older kids, but we're like, of course, we're going to say yes. It seems like a great fit. And I will tell you that adopting our youngest has been way harder than our older two. They all have their own challenges and everything, but I think the physical demands of a young child, and especially a young child with trauma that you can't explain to them yet, they have no comprehension of why you're the wrong person and why they're not with their foster mom or their bio mom anymore. It's so complicated. And so
Yeah.
for us, I always tell people, I'm like, don't be afraid of older kids, because for me, it was easier. Like, and we had two at one time, like it was like a whole adjustment. But they really, and I think it depends on your personality and everything. But I like training my kids to be more independent. And so with older kids, it's like, okay, they can actually get breakfast themselves if I set out cereal and I show them where stuff is. And, I don't have to be doing every single thing. So it's like you said, it's not the reason to do it, but I think it's worth considering to people who are like, oh, it'd be way too hard. It'd be way too
Yes.
difficult.
And
So,
it is like emotionally draining for sure. There are parts of teenage parenting that are hard, but it's just like you're choosing your challenges. Basically, all parenting has challenges.
yeah.
So what are you willing to go through with them? I don't know.
Well, and I always think too, there's no guarantees in parenting ever. Whether you have a biological child, you adopt an infant, you adopt a teenager, there's no guarantees that that child is going to grow up to be the person you imagined he or she
Right.
would be. There's no guarantee. Like, you could have biological kids and they could choose the wrong path and end up in really difficult life situations. And so, when you view it like, oh, if I can get a younger kid, I can avoid that. Well, you can't. There's no telling what's going to happen in the future. So it's like you have to take the kids where they are and love them where they are, and just kind of let go of where the future's going. Focus
Yeah.
on the present moment. So I think that's it's just a really different perspective with older kids, because you're like, well, someone else has already raised them for most of their life, so I'm just gonna be here
Yes.
by day.
Definitely have to like hand over control all the time. Like,
Exactly.
I'm not in control of their actions. I can just show up.
Yes. I think I need to remind myself of that more often too, because sometimes I'm like, oh my goodness, what are they doing? Like, And it's like you have to remind yourself, okay, I just need to be there for them. Okay, so we're almost out of time here, but I was gonna ask really quick, like, if you had one piece of advice you'd give to someone who is getting ready to welcome a teen or an older kid in their home, what would be like your biggest piece of advice?
My biggest piece of advice would be, I think, to surround yourself with people who are going to be there for you and be your community and be your kids' aunts and uncles, because you're going to need a break, and you might think that you have it under control, but you probably don't. And so you're going to need somebody to step in. I wish that I always tell people that, because we didn't do that, and I wish we did.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, like really find your village, like before you officially say yes. And that might seem like something that is simple, or like, oh man, I wanted you to tell me like what I need to do with the teenager.
Right.
And I can tell you that all day long, but really the best thing for you and your family during the adjustment process and later on down the road when trauma triggers start coming back up is to have somebody who can be there for you and your family. So,
Oh, definitely. And we had a pretty good community in place for ours, and there were still times where I was like, I feel alone, and maybe it's just because we're not opening up to those people we have, or we're,
yes.
and so I think having that community and being willing to tell them maybe the hard feelings you're having that are difficult to walk through. And that has been so important for us. So I can definitely imagine with older kids, and finding people who are willing to listen, even if they don't fully understand what it's like to be in your shoes.
Like a support group or something along those lines. Counseling is really helpful.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's great advice. So, well, thank you, first of all, for talking with us, because I've had so many people ask about this, and I'm like, I have not adopted teenagers, so I cannot be the person to speak on this, but I just thought you would be such a good fit. And I definitely think people will benefit from the message you've shared today and sharing your story. And so thank you for that. But I want to know if people want to follow you or catch up with you online, where can they find you at?
Yeah. So my Instagram is Karly Pancake, Karly. and just pancake like the breakfast food. And then my website is karlypancake.com.
Okay.
So those are my two main. I also have an email, but you can sign up for that through my Instagram. So
Okay. Yeah, and I'll put everything down in the description if people want to check her out. I've really enjoyed your content, and I just love that like I found you randomly.
yeah, it's
So
crazy.
we knew each other before. It was like so random. So I
Yes.
love that. But well, thank you so much for chatting with me and for sharing everything. And hopefully you'll have some more people that, maybe watch my videos will come over and they can get more perspective from you and your
Absolutely.
different.
Ask me any questions you have. I'm happy to answer.
Great, great. All right. Well, thank you
Having
very much. Yeah.
Okay, wasn't that interview so great? I loved talking to Karly. I feel like I took away things from what she said. And I'm someone who talks a lot in the adoption and foster care space, but there were still things that she shared that her perspective kind of shifted my mindset in ways that I've been thinking or acting towards my own children. And so I'm really grateful for this interview and so glad that she popped on to talk with us. Don't forget to follow her on Instagram if you enjoyed hearing her story. She shares a lot on there, and I think she has some great reels. And I know I've talked in the past about kind of some adoption creators that I don't enjoy following because they are maybe a little more negative, or I don't know, maybe they kind of just make you feel guilty. Karly's stuff is not like that. I feel like it's very empowering, but also she advocates for the kids. And so highly recommend following her. And if you know anyone who's thinking about adopting teens or maybe is just completely terrified of it, I hope you'll share this video with them. The best compliment you can give us is to like the video. And also don't forget to subscribe if you're looking for more adoption and foster care content like this. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week.